How long does it actually take to double your TSP? And I get this question all the time. And maybe you're staring at that TSP balance, thinking about hanging up your hat a little earlier than planned. Or perhaps you're in a great spot and your pension has you covered and you're wondering just how big you can let that TSP nest egg grow if you just leave it alone. And it's a huge decision. And it all comes down to time and growth. To really wrap our heads around this, we first need to get friendly with a simple but powerful little tool called the Rule of 72. And once you've got that down, I will show you how it played out with real TSP funds in the recent past. And I retired from the Air Force after 20 years, and looking at these real numbers is where the lessons really are. So, what is the Rule of 72? And look, it's not some secret Wall Street code or a fancy algorithm. But let me tell you, when you see what it means for your account balance, it can feel like you've been let into a pretty exclusive club. At its core, it's just a quick and dirty shortcut to estimate how long it will take for your money to double, assuming you're getting a steady average return each year. And it's surprisingly simple. So here's how it works. You take the number 72 and you divide it by your investment's average annual rate of return. And the number you get is the approximate number of years it will take for your investment to double in value without you adding another dime. For example, let's say your TSP is humming along, giving you an average rate of return of 8% per year. You just do the math. 72 divided by 8 is 9. That means, all things being equal, in about 9 years, that pile of money you've worked so hard for could be twice as big. And this is not just some gimmick I cooked up. The SEC even uses it in their own educational materials. And if it's solid enough for them, you can bet it's solid enough for us. Now, let's break this down with some real world examples so it does not remain just a theory. Imagine you're invested pretty aggressively, maybe 100% in stocks through something like the C fund, which mirrors the S&P 500. A long-term average return of 8% a year from a portfolio like that is a perfectly reasonable expectation. So we apply the rule: 72 divided by 8 equals 9 years, and it's that predictable. And if you start with a $50,000 balance and don't touch it, in about 9 years, you should be looking at something close to $100,000. It's a powerful concept when you see it in black and white. This shows precisely why your asset allocation, how you split your money between stocks, bonds, and other investments, is so important. More aggressive means potentially faster growth, but it also means more volatility. A more conservative approach means a steadier but slower climb. And it's all about aligning your investments with your comfort level and your timeline. But what if you're not the type to go all in on stocks? Maybe you're a bit more conservative and you've got a good chunk of your money in bonds, bringing your overall average return down to something like 4%. So what does the math say then? Well, 72 divided by 4 gives you 18 years. Your money still doubles, which is fantastic, but it's going to take twice as long to get there. And this is exactly why I always talk about asset allocation. How you slice up your investment pie between stocks and bonds is one of the most important decisions you'll ever make. A more aggressive mix can get you there faster, but comes with a much bumpier ride. On the other hand, a conservative mix gives you a smoother, steadier climb, but you face the risk of your TSP running out of money with a lower rate of return. Now, let's put this in a scenario many of you might be facing. Say you are 55, you just retired, and you're in a comfortable spot. Your pension is covering the bills, so you don't need to start drawing from your TSP right away. You've got a healthy $500,000 sitting in there. And let's assume it's earning a respectable 7% average annual return. So 72 divided by 7 is about 10.28, and we'll just call it 10 years to keep it simple. So by the time you're celebrating your 65th birthday, that $500,000 could very well have grown to $1 million. Now, is that a guarantee? Of course not. Anyone who tells you that is selling something. The market is going to have its wild swings. You're not going to get a neat and tidy 7% every single year. But as a long-term average, it's a powerful planning tool. And you can always use my compound interest calculator for absolutely free by visiting firestation.com/resources. Now, let's look at the TSP fund and see how this all played out in the real world, because the market has been on a wild ride lately. And imagine you retired in January 2019 with $500,000 in the C fund. What would have happened with no additional contributions? Well, you picked one heck of a time to retire. In 2019, the C fund soared 31.45%, turning your $500,000 into $657,250. And that's not bad for year one. Then 2020 came along with all its craziness. but the market kept climbing and the C fund returned another 18.31%. Your balance grew to $777,592. And the party continued in 2021 with a massive 28.68% return, pushing your balance to $1,606. And just think about that. So you retire in January 2019, and by the end of 2021, just 3 years later, your TSP had doubled. The average annual return over that period was an incredible 26.15% annually. And that was, without a doubt, one of the best times in modern history to retire if you had your TSP entirely in the C fund or the S&P 500 index fund. But what if your timing was not so perfect? What if you retired just a few years later in January 2022, right as the market was heading into a nosedive? With that same $500,000, 2022 would have been brutal. The C fund lost 18.13%, and your balance would have plummeted to $409,350 at the end of that year. Yikes, that's a gut punch right at the start of your retirement, right? Then in 2023, the market came roaring back, made a comeback with a 26.25% return, bringing your balance back up to $516,804. But that's just a $16,000 gain or 3.3% over the course of 2 years because of the bear market in the first year of your retirement. Then 2024 was another strong year, gaining 24.96% and pushing you to $645,798. So far in 2025, at the time I'm recording this video, as of mid-August, it's up another 10.78%, which would bring you to about $715,416. So that brings us to the big question, right? What does it take to get from that 715,000 all the way to the original goal of doubling your money to $1,000,000? Well, the math says you will still need to see about a 40% total return from where you are now. To put that into perspective, if you wanted to pull that off in the next 2 years, say by the end of 2027, you would need to average a whopping 20% return each year. That's a pretty tall order for sure, but even for a healthy market. Now, if you give it a bit more time and spread that growth out over 3 years, you're looking at an average annual return of around 13.33%. And over the course of 4 years, you're looking at an average annual return of 10%. That is certainly more achievable, but still requires very strong performance. It just goes to show how one bad year at the start of your retirement can really stretch out the timeline to reach your goals. Now, look at that journey. If you retired in January 2022, you spent the entire first year in a deep hole and the entire second year just climbing out of it to get back to where you started. You basically lost 2 full years of growth. You still have an average annual rate of return of 10.77% in the past 4 years because of the strong bull market run in 2023 and 2024. But that 2022 bear market hurt your TSP balance at the very beginning of your retirement journey. The stark contrast between retiring in 2019 and 2022 is the single best argument for why having a significant cash position or less volatile assets is so critical when you first retire. If you had been forced to sell and make a withdrawal in 2022, you would have been locked in those devastating losses, right? If you need $20,000 a year from your TSP to cover your expenses, putting that money into the G fund could have avoided that market volatility that we all faced in 2022. But what if you had $60,000 in the G fund? Then that would have covered 3 years of your supplemental expenses in addition to your pension income without facing the market volatility. Again, it's so crucial to have a strong cash position and have your expenses completely figured out before you decide to retire. Now, let's take a look at a completely different approach using the TSP L Income Fund because we have questions about that too. And this is the most conservative of the life cycle funds designed for people who are already in retirement and drawing an income, right? And let's run the same scenario. You retire in January 2022 with $500,000, but this time it's all in the L Income Fund. What happens? In 2022, while the C fund was getting hammered, the L Income Fund lost only 2.7%. Your balance dipped to $486,500. And it's a loss, sure, but it's a paper cut compared to the C fund's gaping wound. Then in 2023, it gained 8.99%, bringing you up to $530,236, comfortably past your starting point. In 2024, it added another 7.37%, growing to $569,314. And as of August 18, 2025, the L Income Fund sits at a 6% return for the year, which would bring your balance to $603,473. So you see what happened there. The L Income Fund did not give you the spectacular rebound that the C Fund did, but it protected you from the terrifying drop. It provided stability, and that is a perfect illustration of why diversification matters so much, especially when you're no longer earning a paycheck. But don't get me wrong. I'm not at all saying that you should put all of your money in your L Income Fund when you're retired, because the inflation risk is still there. The L Income Fund is made up of over 72% bonds and 28% stocks, which could give you the risk of your TSP running out of money due to a lower growth rate. And this leads to a really important question. If your pension covers all your expenses and you don't need to touch your TSP for a decade or more, should you just be 100% in stocks to maximize growth? It's tempting. The numbers from the 2019 to 2021 period make a very compelling case. But here's the reality check. Life is unpredictable. What happens if you have a major medical emergency or a family crisis 5 years into retirement and you suddenly do need to pull money out, and it happens to be during a year like 2022? Being 100% in stocks could be a catastrophic risk if your plans are forced to change. You need to be ready to stomach the losses. So do you have enough cash position to cover when the bear market happens again in the future? We don't know when that bear market will be. And this is where the less exciting funds like the G Fund and F Fund earn their keep, right? They provide stability. They won't make you rich, but they can keep you from getting poor. And let's just imagine if in 2022 you had a 70% C and 30% G fund mix. The C fund lost 18.13%, and the G fund actually gained 2.98%. So your overall loss for the year would not have been over 18%. It would have been less than 12% on a $500,000 portfolio. That's the difference between dropping to $409,000 and dropping to $441,000. That $32,000 buffer is what diversification buys you. It is peace of mind. And you have to remember, you need to ask yourself, do you need the TSP to supplement your expenses? When it comes to FIRE calculation, you need to know what your annual expenses will be. And basically, the rule of 72 is a fantastic tool to have in your back pocket for quick ballpark estimates of how long your growth journey might take. But as we have seen with real TSP numbers, the path to doubling your money is never a straight line. It can be a rocket ship like it was from 2019 to 2021, or it can be a painful roller coaster ride like it's been for those who retired in 2022. Your personal timeline to double your TSP balance will ultimately come down to your appetite for risk and how you choose to allocate your assets. In your working years, the focus is all on growth, right? But once you retire, protecting what you have becomes just as important. Diversification is not just a buzzword, it's the strategy that keeps you in the game for the long haul. And this has been another piece of a video, and I hope we got a lot out of it.